Okay, let's dive right in. Here's a puzzle that's at the very heart of Christianity. How did the first ever Christians, who were devout, first-century Jews, believing in one and only one God, suddenly start worshiping a man from Nazareth, Jesus, as divine? I mean, this isn't just a small theological question. It's a massive historical mystery. And the answer? Well, it changes everything about how we understand where Christianity came from.
So, here's the big question we're going to tackle in this explainer. Was the whole Jesus is God thing a later addition? You know, an idea that kind of crept in over the centuries as the faith spread into the pagan Roman world. It's a super common assumption, but the real question is it actually true?
Now, you've probably heard a version of this story before. It goes something like this. Jesus was this incredible human teacher. After he died, his followers, started saying bigger and bigger things about him. And then as Christianity moved out into the Greek and Roman world, he got promoted, so to speak, gradually turned into a god, kind of like one of those pagan heroes or demigods. This theory has been huge, but it's built on a massive assumption about what the first Christians actually believed.
To really get to the bottom of this, we have to do something crucial. We have to step into the mindset of a first-century Jew. See, their whole understanding of God wasn't just a little different from their pagan neighbors, it was completely, fundamentally opposed to it. And this right here, this is the key that unlocks the entire puzzle.
Okay, check out this contrast because it's so important. The pagan world saw divinity like a big spectrum, right? A gradient. You had a top god, sure, but then there was this whole ladder of lesser gods, demigods, even humans who became gods. You could worship a bunch of them. But for the Jews of Jesus' day, reality was strictly binary. There was the creator, and then there was everything else, a hard, uncrossable line. God wasn't just at the top of the pyramid, God was in a category all by himself.
And that binary view had a really practical, non-negotiable rule. It's called monolatry. It's simple. You worship the one true God and only the one true God, period. This wasn't just some theological preference. It was the absolute core of Jewish identity in a world full of idols. Worshipping anyone or anything else was the ultimate betrayal.
And this wasn't some idea tucked away on a dusty scroll. It was alive, every single day. Twice a day, an observant Jew would pray the Shema. Hear, O Israel, Yahweh our God, Yahweh is one. This was the very heartbeat of their faith, a constant reminder of the absolute, exclusive uniqueness of the God of Israel.
Which brings us right back to our huge, flashing question. I mean, if you've drawn this absolute line in the sand between the Creator and everything else, and you've reinforced it with daily prayer and a total ban on worshiping anyone but God, how on earth do you suddenly start worshiping a crucified carpenter from Galilee? It just seems completely impossible.
All right, so here's the solution. And honestly, it's brilliant. The earliest Christians didn't throw away their monotheism. They didn't decide to cross that uncrossable line between creator and creation. No, they did something way more radical, way more unexpected. They included Jesus inside the very definition of who the one creator God is.
So here's a great way to think about it. Imagine the God of Israel has this unique ID card with features that no one else could possibly have. These weren't just vague ideas. They were the specific things that made God God. His unique deeds, like creating the world, his sovereign seat of authority on the throne, his sacred name, YHW, and the exclusive honors of worship he alone receives. These were the non-transferable identifiers.
So what did the first Christians do? In what can only be described as a theological explosion, the New Testament writers take this very specific, very Jewish ID card for God, and they systematically apply every single one of its unique identifiers directly to Jesus. Let's just watch how they do it.
Okay, let's start with God's unique deeds, like creation. Now, for any Jew, God created the world alone. No helpers, no assistants, but here, in some of the earliest Christian writings we have, Jesus is placed right inside that unique creative act. He isn't a helper. He's the agent through whom everything was made. He's essential to the act of creation itself.
What about the seat of power? Well, in Jewish thought, angels and servants stand before God's throne. They don't dare sit on it. But from day one, Christians were saying that Jesus was raised up to share the divine throne at God's right hand. He doesn't just serve God's rule, he's a participant in it, right from the center of cosmic power. Now for the divine name, get this. In what's probably one of our earliest Christian hymns, in Philippians chapter 2, we're told God gives Jesus the name that is above every name. In that context, there's no doubt what that means. It's a reference to the sacred name YHWH,
Jesus is given the ultimate identity marker of God himself.
And finally, the ultimate deal breaker, the honor of worship. This was the one line you just did not cross. And yet, what do we find? In the book of Revelation, the Lamb who was slain, that's Jesus, is praised and worshipped by all of creation, right there alongside God on the throne. This isn't just giving him a little respect, this is full-blown worship, the kind reserved for God alone. So, what does this all add up to? It means the early Christians weren't just borrowing ideas from their pagan neighbors. They were doing something profoundly Jewish. They were creating, you could say, a new kind of monotheism, one that was radically centered on Jesus.
You know, scholars have a name for this. They call it a Christology of divine identity. Basically, it's the belief that Jesus isn't a second God or some lesser God, but that he is part of the one unique eternal identity of the God of Israel. The whole focus shifts. It stops being about a philosophical question of what divinity is and becomes a deeply personal relational question of who God is.
This chart really lays it out perfectly. The Greek way of thinking asks, what is God? And defines it with abstract ideas like being all-powerful, all-knowing, and so on. That leads you to a hierarchy. But the Jewish framework asks, who is God? And defines him by his unique story and his actions, creator, ruler, the God who saved Israel. By staying in that Jewish framework, the first Christians didn't add a new God to the latter. They revealed a stunning new depth within the identity of the one God they already knew.
So let's just put that old myth to bed. The evidence doesn't point to a slow, gradual evolution influenced by paganism. It points to a sudden, brilliant theological explosion, a revolution that was deeply and profoundly Jewish. The very earliest ideas about Jesus were already the highest they could possibly be.
But here's the thing. Including Jesus in God's identity didn't just tell us something new about Jesus. It revealed something astonishing and frankly scandalous about God himself.
I mean, just think about that for a second. If the human Jesus, the guy who got tired and hungry, who suffered, who was humiliated and publicly executed, if he is part of God's eternal identity, what does that tell you about the very character of God? It means God's identity isn't just found in raw power and glory, but in a place no one would ever have looked.
And this is where it all lands. The cross. A brutal Roman tool for torture becomes the ultimate revelation of who God is. It tells us that God's own identity, his own heart, is found in weakness, in solidarity with human suffering, in the shocking, world-changing picture of God crucified. This story isn't just about how Jesus saves us. It's a story about who God is and always has been.
And that leaves us with this final, profound question to just sit with. If the earliest Christians were right, if this really is who God is, then what does it mean for us, for everything, to believe that the ultimate power in the universe, the very identity of God himself, is eternally and willingly defined by a suffering, crucified human being?